10 seconds, we'll be ready to go. Okay, good to go.
Are we good to go? Yep.
You can proceed, Mr. Vice Chair.
Good morning. My name is Ron Currency, and I'm the Vice Chair of CreateTO. The Board Secretary has confirmed that we have quorum, and in the absence of the Chair, I'd like to now call meeting number 13 of CreateTO to order. Welcome, everyone. Being held using the city's WebEx technology with board members and staff connecting by video conference. While under normal circumstances, we would not be able to hold a virtual meeting, the board recently amended its rules to allow it during the COVID-19 emergency in accordance with the Municipal Emergency Act 2020. Once the emergency is over, we will return to holding our meetings in person in accordance with the advice from City of Toronto's medical health officer. Because we are meeting remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues, as I'm sure there will be some. Members of the public can observe the meeting live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council live. I'd like to remind all staff to keep their mics muted with their videos turned off unless they need to address the board. This will make it easy to conduct a meeting and for those watching along on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and vote on each agenda item. And members, please keep your mics muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item, and ensure that your video is turned on. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hands or unmute their mics if they wish to question staff or speak. I will then create a speakers list and will call on members when it is their turn to speak. When voting on an item or motion, ask the members to ensure that your video is turned on and that you raise your hand to indicate your vote. Members, I want to remind you that if you have any motions, please send them in writing to the board secretary at trab@toronto.ca. All right. Although we are in a different locations and meetings remotely today, CreateTO acknowledges the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Have any interests, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know. All right, having seen none, we'll proceed. And before we proceed with the agenda, I'd like to introduce a new item. Dino Chiesa, our chair, has requested leave of absence from the board effective June 11th, 2020. And all those in favor of adding that item, please indicate. See those hands, okay, thank you. Recommending that the board approves the leave of absence and forward it to the city clerks for appropriate action. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All right, motion carries. Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last two board meetings? And I'm hearing somebody on January 27th, 2020 and April 24th, 2020.
Sandra.
Thank you. I have a motion. And if all members are visible, then we'll conduct a vote. Is there all in favor? There we see the hands. Any opposed? None. Okay, motion carries. Now we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. We have in order. The first item is RA.1, CreateTO Financial and Signing Authorities. I'll ask Brian to provide comments or an overview.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a relatively routine updating of our financial and signing authorities. I'll let our Chief Financial Officer, Jaspreet Hansra Kulasingham, just provide a little more detail on this. Jaspreet.
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
I'm getting a bit of an echo.
I can hear you.
Okay, that's great. I'll deal with the echo on my side. So Brian, I believe the report you're referring to was actually prepared by Steve, the legal counsel. If I can provide a high-level summary, we're just adding Mike Wayland as a signing authority, given his recent promotion. So that's the only change that you will see to those signing authorities. Steve, if I've missed anything on the report, please feel free to let me know, but that's the only change that we're putting forward at this time.
All right. Do any of the members have any questions of staff on this item? And I'll move to adopt the recommendation in the report. All those in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next item is item RA 13.2, first quarter financial results. Again, over to you, Brian.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Maybe I'll get it right this time. This one I'm going to pass over to our Chief Financial Officer. I won't throw a curveball. Jaspreet, if you could just take us through these, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian, and good morning, everyone. If I could turn everyone's attention to table 1 of the report. Here we can see that CreateTO incurred total expenditures of $3.35 million compared to a budget of $3.52 million. This resulted in our favorable first quarter variance of $170,000, the majority of which can be attributed to the timing of project investigative costs. Looking ahead for 2020, we are predicting that our results will come in line with the approved budget of $14.41 million. And with that, I'll just pause for a moment to see if there's any questions relating to our Q1 financial results. Okay, hearing none, I will turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
All right. So if we don't have any questions, can I have someone move to adopt the recommendations in the report? Dennis, thank you. All those in favor, raise your hands, please. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item. Item RA 13.3, the Housing Now Progress Update. There's a staff report with a recommendation, and we also have a staff presentation. Brian, please provide the overview and introduce the presentation.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Housing Now is obviously a major focus of CREATE and its efforts to advance the file on affordable housing. It takes up a lot of our time, and we have a lot of things going on in that area. And so we've got 2 presentations. One is being performed by Don Logie, who's our Senior Vice President. He's going to talk about what's been going on with the original 11 Housing Now sites, which have been effectively in our bailiwick for the last 18 months or so. And then we're going to move on to discussion about the 6 new sites. And that'll be Carlo Bonini, who's a Vice President at CreateTO. And so with that, why don't I pass it over to you, Don? Can you just take us through your presentation? Thank you.
Certainly, Brian. I think, could we put up the presentation of the 11 sites? While we're doing that, I'd like to say there are make three points on this presentation. The first is that we have created a format for individual site reports that we would like to use in our reports to the board, and would appreciate any comments you have as to the information, the completeness of it, or whatever other information you would like to see as board members. So I don't propose to go through each one of them, but I would like to make some high-level comments on the report and the 11 sites. And the first comment is with respect to the impact of COVID-19 on our schedule. We have made adjustments to our schedule because of a number of experience and what we see coming down the pipe. We've made a number of adjustments because of COVID and other matters that are coming. We have not as yet made any adjustments with respect to the financial projections on this, as it is too early to predict what that might be. From what we see, the drivers of housing demand are income and population growth. CMHC is suggesting that the real unemployment rate is now 20% across Canada, not the 13, because a large number of people have stopped looking for jobs. And with our borders shut down, Toronto's main source of population growth, immigration, has dramatically been reduced. And while our border with the US is expected to reopen soon, it is uncertain when immigration from other countries will be permitted to resume. And so as a result of this drop in income, CMHC is predicting that nationally housing starts will drop in half or possibly by 3/4 by the fourth quarter. And prices will drop overall between 9 and 18%. Others like CIBC and DBRS are also predicting significant drops between 5 and 15% in prices over the next year. The consensus seems to be that it'll take until the end of 2022 or later to get back to pre-pandemic levels of sales and prices. And we're also, the last time this occurred in my experience, where we had price drops like this, was in the early 90s, and it took us over 5 years to get back to pre-recession pricing. As some of you know, Toronto home sales have dropped by 80% in April for new homes and 67% for resales. We're not sure how long this is going to last, but brokers are also advising us that there's a significant drop in the number of bids they're receiving on our RFPs, but no change in pricing yet. Our direct experience with the impact of COVID on the first two sites has been that it's taking a lot longer than we predicted to get to complete negotiations. For one site, we sent the lease over, I think it was 6 weeks ago, and we still haven't got their response. For the other site, we were finalizing a term sheet, and the developers had it for over a month before they could return it. We're expecting that we expected to have the leases signed in April. We now are thinking it'll be August or September before we get those done. We're also seeing delays and difficulties in other areas, such as marketing will take longer. We'll have to leave these proposals open for longer. Planning, many developers are saying that because of COVID, the planning processes are taking longer. And so as a result, we have extended the times for marketing, for negotiation, and for planning approvals on these projects. The general consensus seems to be that this will last for between 2 and 4 years. And so we're not, we've extended our timeframes accordingly. So with respect to some specific projects, we are the Warden rezoning package, which the board asked us to relook at, and as did the Planning and Housing Committee. We're bringing a rezoning package back to Planning and Housing on Monday, assuming that goes back to is approved and goes through to to council and is approved, we will take Warden back out to the market. We're considering two options there. One is to market it to the original 16 bidders of the first round, and the other is to take it out as a general to the market as a whole. The reason for doing the former, we believe, is that it will. Those are developers who have already put in the time and effort and are more likely to rebid this process than anyone else and give us a good price. We're concerned that by taking it out to the market, that might discourage some of those bidders who are knowledgeable about this product and these projects. And we'd certainly appreciate any comments that the board may have on their preference on this issue. The second item is that there is at the request of council, a market rent control report is going back to planning and housing and council, and because of the council requirements to hold up all other marketing, Merton, which has its zoning approved and is ready to go, has been held up. It would be our intention to start the marketing for that process once council gives its approval. That will be a general marketing using with the housing secretariat to not-for-profits only, and we've designed a marketing program to attract them and give them sufficient time in this COVID area to prepare their bids. I'm open to questions or at this point, or any other input the board may wish.
So do we have any questions of staff on this? And unfortunately, Don, it looks like I can't see everybody unless I start scrolling. So is there any, oh, there we go. Thanks.
I do, Ron. This is Anna.
Okay. Go ahead, Anna.
So a couple of questions first on the ones that have been awarded. Have the developers given us any specific reasons for the delays? I mean, is it, staff has just taken, because people are working from home, or are they raising any concerns? They're not answering to us. Have we escalated this? Like, what are the reasons?
I think it's the former. They are saying that it's taking longer for them to get their advisors together. Because they are all working from home, we've asked. I mean, normally what we would expect, the process I'm familiar with, is we would get everyone in a room every 2 weeks for 3 months, and we'd spend 4 hours hashing out all the details, and that seems to be the most efficient process. Well, we can't do that now, so it seems to take longer, and we understand what they're going through, as we're having the same issues trying to get everyone together to make decisions and have their input.
I'm just having a little bit of time understanding. I mean, especially those first couple of months where everybody was getting used to new reality. I think there was delays all over, but I'm on the other side getting calls from developers as chair of planning that, they're ready to go, they want to go, they're moving, they can do it. Why can't the city, do it? They want to get it done. And on this side, I'm hearing a completely different tone. So I think we need to escalate these inside the company. I mean, here we are having a board meeting and making decisions and deciding things, and things are moving, and people aren't getting used to making decisions in these days. I mean, of course there was going to be delays. The world was adapting to this new reality, but we're opening up. So to have so much delays, I'm very, very concerned. And if that's the only reason that they've given us, I think we need to put a bit more pressure on it. That's my comment. The other question I had about these bids is one of the things that came up on the 6 sites during council, and I'm pretty sure that this was one of the recommendations on the first 11 sites as well, was the community benefits agreements. Are these being part of the negotiations? Have we ensured that that recommendation was taken into consideration as we are negotiating this?
Yes, as the matter of fact, that we had a provision in our RFP. We're working through with the first 2 bidders to see if there's what they can provide on this thing. We're going to be a little more, I think, in the next round. We're getting together with SFDA to try and provide more clarity on those requirements for our next bids, to make sure that the developers have the information they need to know exactly how they could implement these things. But in the first one, we did have the requirement, and we are talking to them about how during construction they might incorporate equity or provide employment opportunities or whatever for equity-seeking individuals.
Okay. With to the planning process taking longer, so you said you've adjusted and you're expecting the planning process to take longer for everything else that we're doing from here forward. Did I hear you correctly, Ben?
Yes.
So I don't know how that is happening, and I would like to further discuss this even off this call, because if there was something that we did during this pandemic was elevate affordable housing inside the city, and we have something called the concept to keys that's being led by the city manager that is to review all this planning process, and there's a new process being put in place. The key is to all affordable housing projects, especially housing now, to move as quickly as possible. So I mean, as a board member, but also as chair of planning and housing and housing advocate, there's not going to be delays in the planning process. I mean, reach out to us. We'll be the biggest advocates. Like that, we're in conversations to ensure that all these projects are elevated, that things are happening. So I would like to fully understand what is taking these delays, and I would like to have a conversation with Greg Lintern and CreateTO to see how we can ensure that these delays don't happen, because they shouldn't be happening. That's not the message, again, that we're hearing from the other side. With regards to the warden, so explain to me why do you think that opening up to the market would discourage those 16 bidders from applying?
It's been my experience that when they have put all this time and effort into it, and that they would be concerned that that they'd be wasting their time in doing this. It's a lot of effort to put these things together. I think that there's a better chance of getting a bid from the 16 anyway were in the first round than from the general public. But frankly, we're open to doing both either. So if it's the wish that we open it up to the market as general, we'll do so.
Sure, I'm just trying to understand staff's layperson, not in this industry. I mean, yes, I understand the 16 that didn't give us that great of a bid anyways in the first place. That's why we're here. I mean, they would actually think that they have more knowledge about all this. They're ahead of the curve, having more people bidding, having less or more if you're confident on your bid. I mean, I just don't understand how that would discourage people, but maybe some industry has more knowledge than I do that that is a fact. Okay, those are my questions for now.
Okay, Brian, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, just to address a couple of items. I personally I'm thinking that we should probably just take it to the wider market. I don't see a cost to us doing that. I mean, that's the job of the brokers, and a lot of bidders who won't be interested will just not respond, and that's fine. So that doesn't cause any extra work. So I'm happy to do that. I think that's probably the best, fairest. And we've made substantial changes to that land plan, and we've increased the density, and so I think it's a different deal. So that would be my suggestion, a recommendation. Just in terms of some of those items that you were referring to, Councillor Bylaw, we're trying to identify, well, what are all the sources of these delays, and I've been trying to think through my mind, what are they, and it's not one thing. It's like 7 things. Like the development, the proposal process is a long chain with a bunch of links, and there's weaknesses in each one of those links. And some people are just bang, they've adapted to it. COVID-19, not a problem. At home, let's go. And others are just moving much more slowly. And even as simple, and this is not, and I don't want to use this as an excuse, but it's an example. For example, our own planning department, I understand a lot of them were not really in a position to work from home. And so when COVID-19 hit, they were like pens down. They were told to go home, and they weren't right. They didn't have computers at home that were able to hook into the computer systems of the city. Now, city has resolved that, okay, but that delay did occur. That happened. The other thing that I would suggest to you is a concern of mine, certainly on the 2 that we were dealing with proponents, is the market dynamics have changed dramatically. And so they are now being much more careful about what they are prepared to commit to and how quickly they're prepared to commit to it. And that's something we can work through. But they're quote unquote not willing to take chances. They really want to pin down all the details and facts and understand the dynamics of the market. And so it sort of drives their due diligence process. Make sure you do this, make sure you do that. Don't leave that one behind, because they know the market has changed now. And when is the market going to bounce back? That's a great question. Many people have many different views about it, but when in a time of uncertainty, people tend to take the less courageous route in terms of making assumptions. And so that's kind of where we are. It's just a bunch of things that are and we as an organization, we're trying to push it. We would like these things to go faster, and I can see they're backing up behind us. We only got 2 plus 9 plus 6, that's 15. We've got a lot of stuff behind us, and we got to push it through the pipeline. And so we understand this issue. And to your point about the concept of keys, that's a big one. I personally have been involved in that process, and I have great hopes for it. I hope it does, create some systemic change that allows us, allows the city, because we are obviously a prime beneficiary of our own affordable housing project. So we're aware of that, and are providing input, and hopefully that will allow us to move things faster.
Don, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Deputy Mayor, that planning has been very responsive and have placed a lot of priority on these Housing Now sites. They've been working as hard as they can on this thing. When we contact them, they get right back to us. We're working very hard together, but it just takes longer when you can't get together and resolve things. I think it's a human dynamic, but I don't know how else to say it.
Okay. Anna, are you done with your questions?
Yeah, that's for now. Yeah.
Is there anyone else that has questions of staff? No.
My hand up, Ron. Can you see?
No, couldn't see your hand up.
It's on
Okay.
mine. Is the clerk helping you with that?
No.
Can I just find out if the clerk can't see my hand, please? Just so for future.
I see you. I just did. Are you trying to press a hand or lift your hand?
No, I have my hand on the list. I pressed my hand. So maybe we're not using that feature today.
Well, I'm not. I'm actually doing it just by your actual hand.
I understand, and I'm asking, could you ask the clerk, just for interest, does my hand show up on the screen? Are you there with the clerk or are you at home?
No, I'm not there with the clerk.
Oh, okay. All right. Because normally the chair would be there with the clerk. All right. So we're not using the icon today, only hands up. Okay.
Right, Councillor Chair.
But can you see my hand? That's just yes or no
I
on
can
your
see
screen, clerk.
your hand in the video, but we're not using the feature on
We're
WebEx.
not using that feature. Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you. Okay, so here's, I am just going to ask, can you review the Warden site? The other thing with the chart, I appreciate the chart. I always like to see how big of a site it is, Dawn. So on that first scan chart, I think we should have something pretty standard, and the original chart that came for the original Housing Now always had how large of a site that is. So if you could just make sure that every time we're kind of able to see how much room there is, that would be helpful, because on each of your sheets, you start with that, but it's not on the other chart.
Okay.
So it's just something that's standard with the same amount of information on a chart is helpful. Number one. Number two, the Warden up to, what is it, 600 units on 7 acres. Who's going to review how we're at 600 units there? It's a very large site. What else is going on that site? Tell us a bit more about how you've come to this, because we sent you back to get more.
So, yes, Councillor, we were at 500 when we met in February. First of all, the site, the actual site of for development, available for development, is 2.98 acres, 2.8 acres, I should say. And so we're putting the 600 unit on the 2.8 acres. The rest of the site is taken up park, TTC, and roads. So the density we achieved was where last time we came to you, we had a 7 acre, an 11 acre, and an 18 acre, sorry, a 7-story, an 11-story, and an 18-story. We now have two 18-story buildings and a 6-story building right at the north end. So we were able to get another almost 100 units out of this, and given the need and the direction we got from the board to try and improve the financials, we increased only marginally the affordable housing to 250 units.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that explanation. Appreciate that. And congratulations, you've gotten more. And I agree with Brian. I think it should go out widely. Let's just test again, see what's happening. Someone may want to come in at this point, didn't last time. The other thing is for the community benefits agreement. I think that'll probably come up at planning and housing. Look and see where that is. Have you been in touch at all with the Community Benefits Network, which has negotiated deals with Metrolinx and others, the major negotiator of community benefits agreements?
We're in the process. We've been talking to Chris Phibbs, and we're in the process of setting up those meetings prior to going out on our next bid, and also to help with.
Sorry, who are you setting them up with? Who are you setting them up with?
Chris Phibbs and people in her office.
Yeah. So I'm going to move that community benefits, or you might, Councillor Bailão, Deputy Mayor, that the Community Benefits Network be involved in these discussions as folks that have successfully negotiated pretty good benefit package, or pretty good agreements to bring in those who don't have access to these types of jobs. And the other thing is other things that were on the Housing Now. I'm sorry to bring this up, but there was a lot of other things that were listed by council around the land. and trying to use what we have to meet other goals as well. So I know there was some long-term care, there was some co-ops, there was some different things. How advanced are you in bringing those into consideration on these sites, Don?
So with long-term care, we've identified a potential site being the Esther Shiner Orley Yards at Leslie and Shepherd. We're working with the North York General, who wishes to put a long-term care facility there. Our city's long-term care declined to be part of that. We are, and with respect to, I'm sorry, you mentioned, what was the other use you mentioned?
Well, there's co-ops, there's a whole number of things that I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Are you familiar with that list that was approved
so the
when
co-op-
Housing Now was approved?
So we've met with the co-op, the National Co-op Housing Group. We've been trying to engage them in being part of these bids. We're going to try again on Merton to see if they can be involved in setting up a rental co-op. But you know, this is something that no one has come forward with, even though we've exposed it. We spent time with them to try and educate them on the Housing Now program.
Have you spoken to Abby Bond about this hurdle that you're unable to go over at all, considering her expertise in this area?
No, I've spoken to her staff about that. In fact, we've had her staff involved in that.
Yes, but you haven't spoken to Abby.
No.
Okay. The other thing is, and this is kind of a more general thing, given that these aren't normal times, and everybody's been pretty clear about that, if we remember back to the 70s when there was this huge influx of money for nonprofit housing that was built, that's still with us today. I am, and Anna, you might be in a better position to answer this one, or Brian, you might be. Is there any thought that there might be a similar program from the federal government coming out of COVID, because the whole housing market is being restructured, the whole society will probably be restructured? Yeah, as somebody just said, I think on this call, the true unemployment rate isn't 13, it's 22%, and others think it's higher. And that we are going to have a housing crisis like we've never seen before. And perhaps that national housing strategy or plan may be one of those things cities are asking for through FCM or through our Saad Rafi Recovery and Reimagine group, that is a pretty big oar to put in the water. I'd just like to know if anyone's heard anything about that. And that might have an impact overall on some of these properties. Is anybody aware of that? Oh,
I know, first of all, each one of these projects, we're taking advantage of the existing.
no, I'm talking about some brand new. I'm asking.
Oh, no.
I'm reimagining everything out of COVID. That's what the city is doing. We have a recovery and reimagine. If we were to, I'm asking if, and perhaps what the potential is. So I know Abby's on the line. She may have been in conversations of this nature with Saad or others around what the asks are going to be. I know it's not right in front of us, but I think that given this, what's happening right now, it's good to just ask if anybody's thinking about that. It may impact the other sites. That's what I'm asking. So I gather you haven't been in those conversations, but would you mind if I ask Abby if she's been in any of those?
Please.
Good morning, Councillor, and good morning to the rest of the board members this morning. Thank you for the question. Obviously, housing as part of a recovery initiative is going to be really important for Canada and also for Toronto. And so the work that we've been doing to support the Deputy Mayor around her housing and people action plan really forms the basis of any intergovernmental kind of requests for funding. It's a really good foundation for us to ask for help specifically with new programs for affordable housing that can both house essential workers and also people who need supportive housing and are experiencing homelessness. And we've been having some informal discussions behind the scenes with both our provincial and federal counterparts at a staff level. But I will let the deputy mayor, and we also had a discussion, I think about a week ago now, with Saad Rafi and the Office of Recovery about how we can work together on that housing recovery ask. But I will let the deputy mayor speak to her own paper about the intergovernmental work that we're doing at a political level.
Ryan, I see your hand up there.
Thank you. I thought it might be useful. We do have on the call Ryan Glenn, who's actually on Saad Rafi's task force, and I wonder, Ryan, if you could provide any sort of insights that you might have, or what you're hearing. I know that's actually not specifically what you've been tasked with, but since you're sitting in on those meetings, do you have anything you can bring to the table in terms of that conversation?
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to make sure I'm not on mute. Nice to see everybody. Thanks, Brian. And I would echo what Abby said. Our team at the Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild had met with the deputy mayor and the team that was involved in that working group. And we're going to be evolving those conversations. But yes, Councillor Fletcher, to your question, this is a common theme that's coming up. When we're having conversations with multiple different community groups, including internal conversations at the city as well.
I guess maybe Anna, you want to say something, but I just remember one of the bids had a community partner, but it didn't make it. And I don't know if there's any chance of that kind of funding. I'm interested in what Anna or Abby has to say, and Ryan, it's not your file, but you, of course. As far as increasing funding to those community partners to be part of these kinds of bids. So we're really looking at some of those strategic goals that we have as far as a nonprofit housing that will be there forever and using the lands in that way. And I think it's fair that we have this conversation. We are part of the city and really should be having this conversation with Saad in a more formal way, but I'd like to get some feedback on that question. Is that even an option, that might be part of the recovery? Are we asking that would be part of the recovery? Because it would change a lot of the approach here when we have a partner that would have capital dollars to build on our sites along with a developer.
If I could just give a little bit of feedback, since people had mentioned the work that as part of the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force, which I led the housing working group. So the first thing I'll do is I'll actually share with the board the recommendations that we've sent, which is that policy paper that we've actually shared with FCM and is being used as the basis for our intergovernmental asks, and a lot of stakeholders in the housing industry are using the same points. A lot of it is flexibility in the housing, the national housing strategy, and speed up basically an advance of the housing strategy, which would open doors for many organizations to come through. So I think, to respond to Councillor Fletcher's question, I think there's a lot of work ahead of us, but there's definitely, I think, an opportunity. I think the conversations that we've been having with CMHC is that they're looking to make recommendations to the minister. I've had the opportunity to speak to the minister as well. He's looking into how to further support the strategy and enhance the national housing strategy. And I think that, and I've heard that CMHC is having conversations with nonprofits and municipalities across the country, and they're much more flexible than that they're have been in the past. And Abby could probably comment even a little bit on this, but I think that they're very eager to get the money out the door to these projects, and I think there are great opportunities. There's still a lot of work ahead of us on government advocacy, but I think there are opportunities to push the federal government to advance the national housing strategy a lot quicker, and to have the provincial government, who has been quite absent from this strategy.
Yes, maybe I can just comment. It's Abby here. A good indication maybe of how the federal government and CMHC have shifted a little bit in their approach, and hopefully this is the sign of more things to come. To your point, Councillor Fletcher, about whether there will be new programs coming out of recovery, is how they responded to our ask for modular housing. So when I arrived at the city in February and first had a discussion with CMHC pre-COVID, they were indicating that we really had kind of a 9-month journey ahead of us before they would be able to confirm funding. After COVID hit and we went back to them and said, we really want to expedite this funding, they basically turned that funding around in principle within a matter of weeks. And we are really in the final stages of the legal agreements with them. So they shifted considerably in their timelines for the modular funding. So I'm really hoping that that is an indication of how seriously they're taking the need to accelerate the National Housing Strategy funding, even though that particular stream came through the Innovation Fund. They're certainly hearing the desire for multiple partners, municipalities and nonprofits and co-op partners, to see funding deployed on the ground to shovel-ready projects as quickly as possible. And we can all see what a massive impact that would have on a recovery coming out of COVID. So we hope it's the shape of things to come, but more advocacy, as the Deputy Mayor indicated, will certainly be needed to really unlock that funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to that, if I can, Mr. Chair, I have many sites, as probably you do, Deputy Mayor, where the church had land, and then now that's a seniors housing. They used that land and were funded directly for that. Many co-ops were at that time. And I'm not sure they'd be shovel ready. I'm kind of looking at a model where they'd be able to secure funds to be part of the larger Housing Now sites. And I don't know if that's even a gleam in anybody's eye at this point, if that's part of our advocacy or not. Because getting in the door is very hard because they don't have a lot to bring there. Or guarantee.
Yeah, I think Ryan's got a comment. Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Councillor, yes, I can confirm that through TOR, we are having ongoing conversations with faith groups around opportunities that may present themselves with respect to their portfolio and potentially partnering with us on city building, including housing. You can appreciate that a lot of these different faith groups, specifically the United Church, even pre-COVID, had significant issues with respect to their portfolio. These are more acute now. So I believe, and I agree with you, that there's a significant opportunity for the city to evolve its relationship with many of these faith groups to...
I don't think that's what I'm asking, because it's not faith groups. That there are nonprofits that already build housing. They have to go pretty slowly, because I'm just thinking of Wood Green in my area. They are a housing provider, builder of houses, nonprofit, long history. But putting together all of the dollars to make something successful is very hard. So I think you're referring to a church using its property. I'm looking at our property and how somebody comes in and puts value added, so that we get the mix of housing that we're also looking for, particularly in the rental side. And I don't want to belabor this today. I just want to put that on the agenda. It'll probably be well discussed on Monday, I would think. So just heads up that we could be thinking, and maybe you should tell everybody what TOR means. I do, but I don't think everybody on the call does, Ryan.
I'm sure I'll get that one right. It's Toronto Office.
I'm sure you will.
Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild, for everybody's edification.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's it. This. Thank you very much for all your work.
So we've got the recommendation to receive the item for information. Councillor Fletcher, you did.
Wait. Yeah.
You had to add something.
I have a letter there as well, Mr. Chair, asking that there's a second exit that the TTC has to build. And one of the opportunities would be to get a new site right on the Danforth. And if that was the case, then CreateTO working with the TTC to put value added there. There's one on Woodbine that's a single story second exit. And I certainly think there's an opportunity here to create at least a good number of stories there if that's the site that they choose. And of course, they wouldn't do that themselves. That would be through CreateTO. So that my letter just asked for us to be, to help, to work with the TTC on that, for CreateTO to do that. So I'd just like to move that request formally here. I think everybody's seen that letter. And I think Councillor Bailão has a motion on the Community Benefits Network, but making sure that we have that. Yeah. I'd say work with rather than reach out, Deputy Mayor.
I'll take that as a friendly amendment.
And I think they're housing now, not hosing now.
I'm sure Carol will work her magic.
That's the SCTV version.
Here, Carol. So
Taking my hand down now.
Yeah. Are we bringing the motion up on the screen?
Oh, hang on. Honest to God.
Carol? No, can't hear you. Is anybody else hearing Carol?
No.
No. Oh.
Write it on a piece of paper and show us.
Put it in a bottle and send it. I can't even get the whole screen up here today now.
Funny, I can see her name without the mute signal on it, so.
It says city clerk is mute.
Well, that's up, I'm looking at just Carol's picture.
Yeah, on the side, it shows mute.
It's Joe, so you must be double muted, because there's a double muted approach there.
Yeah.
Hello, members. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay. Several different audio options here. So we just need a few minutes to prepare the motions. Okay. And then we'll be able to display them for you. So I don't know if there are other questions on this item or if you want to hold it down or just give us a few minutes. It's up to you.
Well, we've got one more presentation, depending on how long. If you think you need a few more minutes, we can hold it down and just go to the next one. I think we'll do that.
Yes, so that makes sense, Mr. Chair, because the next presentation is on this same item. So the motion shouldn't be voted on until the entire item 3 is complete. So I can work on it while the next presentation is underway.
Okay, so we'll hold that down and we'll go to item RA 13.4, the modular housing phase 1. And this is a presentation from Senior Vice President of Development at CreateTO. And Brian, if you want to provide any overview to begin with and then introduce the presentation.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to talk about the 6 new Housing Now sites. And so I don't know where Carlo is. I'm looking for him. I think that was
the next.
Yeah, that was part of the original Housing Now. So there was 2 parts to it. The first one Don just did. Now the second part is Carlo.
Okay.
Carlo was going to take us through the 6 new sites. Carlo, are you ready to roll?
I am indeed, yes, thank you. If I may ask the clerk to please put up the presentation on the 6 new sites. Thank you. Thank you and good morning. So I will be taking you through a high-level presentation with regard to the 6 new Housing Now sites that were announced by Mayor Tory on May the 26th, and that were...
Sorry.
Are we good to go?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Can you all hear me? Okay.
We're
okay,
good,
so-
Carlo.
Okay, good. So as I mentioned, I will be taking you through the 6 new sites that were announced by the mayor on May the 26th and that were subsequently approved by City Council at its meeting of May the 28th. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I will provide a general overview of the Housing Now targets on city-owned lands, a brief description of the 6 new sites, the housing impacts and delivery of various city building benefits, and finally, our proposed timelines and next steps. Next slide, please. This is just to reiterate that the Housing Now initiative is one part of the city's overall Housing 2020-2030 action plan that has set an overall target of approving 40,000 affordable rental units, including 18,000 supportive housing units over the next 10 years. Of that, the Housing Now initiative has a target of delivering 10,000 affordable housing units on city-owned lands. The Housing Now Phase 1, with our initial 11 sites, will deliver 3,850 units. Add that, the 2 initial modular housing sites with 250 units, and the recently announced Phase 2 sites with a target of 620 units over 6 sites will amount to approximately 4,700 units in total, achieving 47% of our overall target. Now, in order to meet our target of 10,000 units, we will need to deliver 5,300 remaining units over the next 10 years. Therefore, we have set a goal of releasing 5 sites per year, with an average of approximately 500 units per year. However, we also understand that it will become increasingly challenging finding available sites within close proximity to transit in order to fulfill our goal of delivering affordable housing in complete communities with various city building attributes in a transit-supported manner. What CreateTO wants to do is develop a pipeline of property assets and a stage gate process for improved forecasting of the identification of sites and delivery of units. In essence, sites that are going to be ready now, ready soon, and ready later. So in doing so, CreateTO has identified striking a property pipeline planning committee comprising of Ashmead Ali as Director of Portfolio Strategy, Barb Carew, our Director of Client Relationship Management, and myself as VP of Land and Development Planning and our respective teams to work with city staff and stakeholders to continually explore sites and opportunities for affordable housing. Now, this exploration will include properties that may not be seen as traditional housing sites. As an example of this, we will include exploring opportunities to add housing to community centers set for major capital works and or building on surface parking lots located in existing parks. This may also include looking at repurposing Toronto Fire Services sites or police sites in order to integrate housing. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the 6 new Housing Now sites recently approved at City Council. And they are 1627 and 1675 Danforth, the Danforth Garage site in Councillor Bradford's ward. 1631 Queen East, also in Councillor Bradford's ward. 158 Borough Drive in Councillor Thompson's ward. 2444 Eglinton East, also in Councillor Thompson's ward. 405 Sherburne in Councillor Wong Tam's ward. And 150 Queens Wharf Boulevard in Councillor Cressy's ward. So why these particular sites? Well, as with the first 11 sites in Phase 1, we felt these sites met a number of key criteria. So despite the seemingly small area of some of these sites, we felt they are located in areas that are favorable for a high residential yield estimate. We feel that these sites could achieve an appropriate timing to market, that is, being able to get to market within the next 1 to 3 years. The caveat that I will say here to echo what Dawn had presented is that we really don't know what the ultimate effect of the pandemic is on the market, so we will be continually monitoring this. These sites, we feel, should have manageable operational and logistical constraints. However, once again, with the caveat that until such time as we start our deep dive into the due diligence on these sites, we won't know what we will uncover that might cause some delays. All sites are currently underutilized and definitely not achieving their highest and best potential. Each site can deliver excellent city building opportunities. And finally, each of the sites are located within close proximity to transit, achieving our transit-oriented development goals. In total, these sites comprise 11.7 acres of city-owned land and will deliver between 1,455 and 1,710 overall units, of which 530 to 620 are to be affordable rental units. Now, it should be noted that these are high-level estimates of units and proposed development on these sites. We have not had the opportunity to meet with planning staff, nor with each of the individual councillors to determine ultimate project yield. However, we do intend to be aggressive and push the regulatory envelope in order to achieve the maximum housing potential on these sites. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the first phase sites, denoted by the green dot, the 2 modular sites, the purple dot, and now the 6 recently announced sites denoted by the yellow dot, and how we have attempted to choose sites that are geographically distributed throughout the city and all within close proximity to transit. In terms of a go-forward strategy, to the extent possible, we will explore wards of the city and to work with councillors we have not had the opportunity as of yet. Next slide, please. So phase 2 housing now will continue to retain public ownership of lands while leveraging real estate value to invest in affordable housing and city building benefits. In terms of overall housing impacts, these sites will deliver, as mentioned, 1,400 to 1,700 total residential units broken down as follows: 1,060 to 1,240 total rental units, 530 to 620 total affordable rental units, with an estimated project launch, market offering, sale, for example, targeted between 2021 and 2025. With regard to city building benefits, this will be subject to site-specific analysis that we have yet to do. However, in general, these sites will generate new rental supply on transit, new neighborhood revitalization opportunities, new jobs and economic development opportunities, and new retail, commercial, and employment uses. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, we began our site selection due diligence back in January, which led to the local councillor consultations on the affected sites in May of this year, with the mayor's announcement and then city council approval of the 6 new sites May the 28th. We are here today to provide the CreateTO board with this update, and we will continue with our more detailed due diligence work as well as further status updates starting in Q3 and beyond. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've got now all the presentations. Carol, are you ready with the revised motion? Or do we have any, while she's still doing that, if we have any other questions that have come up? Oh, we've got there, my screen.
I just have staff.
Sorry. Your internet, you're spinning a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
I just, now that if we can combine these 2 groups of sites and have it on a chart with the dates that we expect to go to construction, like a full chart with all these properties, so we can continue to follow this, and then we can have it at our board meetings. That would be greatly appreciated.
No problem, we'll do that.
Hello, Ron.
Hello? Is that Paula?
Hello. Yes.
You don't have your video on, Paula. I don't see you.
Oh, I had my hand. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I thought it was on. So I come on a new device to get rid of the one that wasn't working. somebody just outlined to me how these sites get introduced into the surrounding community. Who does it? How's it done? What point is it done? And what's the messaging that's used, that has been used for the other sites?
Brian, can you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to ask Carlo to take that one because he's been sort of at the front end of a lot of that stuff. So Carlo, do you want to take the councillors through it, please? Thanks.
No problem, no problem. So Councillor
Not just
Fletcher.
the councillors, the whole board, please, Brian. Right? Thank you. Yep.
Go ahead, Carlo.
Certainly, Councillor Fletcher. So with regard to looking at the various sites, obviously we work very closely with city planning to ensure that with respect to any future type of development, it does fit within the neighborhood context. We also have a very robust community consultation process that we associate with each of the sites. For the first 4 Housing Now sites, this included 2 community consultation meetings. We also had various pop-up events. We also had direct stakeholder events with certain members of the community. So community consultation is definitely something that is very key with regard to this, the entire Housing Now process.
So I would like to see all those materials. I'll probably ask for that all on Monday, just for a heads up. What's the introduction? What do you send out first? What does that look like? Because there's a fair amount of pushback here. And I'm not sure that we have the sweet spot as far as getting the most out of these sites. That's my concern. And it would be great if I could see those before Monday, but if not, I'll ask for them at the Planning and Housing, so we can make sure that we eliminate a lot of frustration on everybody's part. As you know, that's not planning's job to market, in a way, market the idea of Housing Now. So that's really what I'm interested in, is how that's working. And you don't sit in them, but we do sit in all the planning meetings where we have the application in, and there are a lot of people that are fussed up. So whatever we can do in the front end to tamp that down, eliminate that to the best degree possible, also helps us with the councillors who are having sites in their wards. So I do want to make sure that we have hit the sweet spot on how that's happening for the, can see how you've done that for the previous sites. We've got some that are coming up, and the 6 new ones, 2 of those sites are actually right across the street from my ward, and one of them is across from Don Somerville, which is a TCHC ward with a lot of density, 3 acres and 1,700 units. That's a lot, and that was done without hardly a peep. So I think we should be as creative as possible. We are CreateTO on how we're marketing the idea of Housing Now in the cities now. So can I ask that I get that, or would you rather I do that through the committee?
So, Councillor, if I'm understanding this correctly, are you asking for the process that we would go through in terms of how we introduce this to the community?
I'm asking how you did that for the first 4 sites that we're on now, for the 11. I want to see that. What's the template, and what are the materials? What does it look like? I can ask that as a report to this board. That's okay too.
So we do have a very good recording of all of the community consultation process that we did go through for the first 4, working very closely with our Director of Communications at CreateTO. So we could certainly provide you with a summary of the community consultation that we did go through.
Yeah, so I'll ask for that formally then. Would you like a motion, Mr. Chair, or you'll just take that as a, do you want me to make that motion?
I think we can make that. I mean, Carol, do you think we need a motion, or can we just have the direction?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, it can be an undertaking,
Okay.
or if you like, we can prepare a motion.
think an undertaking
I
is,
think I'm happy with that, Ron. An undertaking is fine. So just an undertaking to provide us with, from beginning to end, all the materials, et cetera, et cetera. Let's start there. And that'd be really helpful to the board so that we're making sure we're maximizing everything that we can on these sites. Thank you.
okay. So Carol, do you have the revised motion?
Mr. Chair, we have a motion ready for Councillor Bailao. We'll display it for you.
Motion's fine too, the one you sent me. Thank you very much.
So this would be another motion. So we would receive it for information first and then have this motion as well, or which one first?
Mr. Chair, this is a motion to amend the item, so you don't need to receive for information. So this motion can be voted on. We have another motion by Councillor Fletcher that we can display for you now.
Okay.
So those are the two motions, Mr. Chair. When you're ready, you can vote.
Okay, so we'll vote on them one at a time. I think since this one's up on the screen, let's see if I have to get everybody's picture up on me here. So there we go. Okay, great. On that last motion, is there any questions, or can we just vote on it? All in favor? Can I see hands? Okay, anyone opposed? No. So that motion is carried. And then if you can display that first motion, which I believe was Councillor Bailau's motion. Do it one more time. Carol, are you going to display that first motion? Just one more time.
Yep, it's underway.
Okay. So here's the first motion, and all in favor? Okay, and that motion is carried. All right. I think now we can move. And that is the item 13.4, modular housing. And Ryan, please provide the overview and introduce Steve.
Deputy Mayor Bailao would know this, but a lot of work has been ongoing, and she's been leading a lot of it and sort of providing a lot of, I guess, rocket fuel to keep this thing moving. Obviously, the Housing Secretariat and CreateTO have been involved in this initiative. The work has been led at CreateTO by Mike Whalen, and Mike, I would ask you to take it over and run us through where we are today on the modular housing initiative. This thing's just sort of popped up, and it's really taken a lot of time since COVID-19 came on board. So it's been quite amazing how fast things have been happening. So I don't want to steal your thunder, Mike. So can you run with it, please?
Sure. Thank you, Brian. And good morning, everybody. Delighted to be able to give you an update on phase one of our modular housing this morning. And we've been working with Abby Bond and the Housing Secretariat in the city, and this is really a great news story. So, Carol, if I could get the presentation put up on the screen, please, that'd be great. Are we able to enlarge that? There we go. Thank you. So if we just go to the next slide, please. So in today's presentation, I'd like to review with you the council motions that have taken place. I'll show you some examples of the modular housing in the city of Vancouver, which we're looking to replicate here. I'll review with you how we selected the first two sites for phase one and talk about some of the details of these sites. I'd like to discuss with you our rationale for sole sourcing phase one. We do plan to go out with an RFP for any additional sites going forward, and I'll touch base with you on some of the key milestone dates. So next slide, please, Carol. It was approximately about a year ago when City Council requested staff to report back with a plan to implement a new modular supportive housing initiative. A report was submitted and to the Planning and Housing Committee on March 23rd of this year. But also on March 23rd, an emergency was declared in the city due to the health risks arising from COVID-19. So as a result of this, Mayor Tory directed staff to find ways to expedite the delivery of this first phase of modular housing, with the objective of completing up to 110 new homes as quickly as possible. And on April 30th this year, the City Council report titled Implementing the Toronto Modular Housing Initiative as an urgent response to the COVID-19 pandemic was adopted. So as a result of that, we had a live project to house the homeless and provide them with a home for their transition from shelters. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates 4 different projects that have been built in the city of Vancouver, and they give you an idea of the type of housing that we're looking at for our 2 projects. These buildings were manufactured by Horizon North, who is an organization we're working with for phase 1 of our modular housing program. They're currently headquartered in Calgary, and they have manufacturing facilities in Kamloops, BC, Calgary, Alberta, and Grimsby, Ontario through their subsidiary, NRB. The city of Vancouver has completed 15 modular buildings, and Abby was responsible for overseeing this program when she was working with the city of Vancouver. The buildings are 3 stories high. They typically consist of approximately 58 suites, and they have additional social services space for the complex consisting of a commercial kitchen, shared laundry facilities, a lunchroom, excuse me, an office for the not-for-profit operator, janitorial space, and some storage space as well. So as a whole, they typically have an area of approximately 29,000 square feet. So we're using a similar design that's been modified to meet the Ontario Building Code and the constraints of the 2 respective sites that we've landed on. Next slide, please. So this slide provides you with 4 interior views of the projects in Vancouver. A typical suite is approximately 350 square feet in area. It's a self-contained unit with a private bathroom, kitchenette, table for eating, and a sitting area, which is illustrated in the top 2 photographs. Down in the bottom right is a photograph of the commercial kitchen where meals are prepared typically once a day for residents, either breakfast or lunch. And they also typically prepare meals on holidays as well. On the bottom left is a photograph of a lunchroom that exists in the projects in Vancouver. So in terms of an operator, the Housing Secretariat's in the process of either going out or having recently gone out with an RFP to obtain a non-for-profit operator for both facilities. And for your information, Abby has kindly advised that she'd be pleased to meet with the board anytime in the future or speak to you in more detail regarding the operational side of the business or on the program as a whole. So if you have any questions on that front, since she's with us today, I would ask Abby to help out in terms of that side of the business. Next slide, please. Our original list for the for phase 1 consisted of looking at over 40 properties as part of our selection process. This slide illustrates the site criteria that we used to select the 2 sites for the first phase. which consisted of almost a dozen different types of criteria. As part of the selection process, we looked at the size of the sites, we explored the current use in the property, the viable zoning and official plan designation. We also explored the environmental condition of the property and whether utilities were readily available. Other key criteria consisted of proximity to public transit, proximity to existing services, and connection to people experiencing homelessness, as well as the who own the properties. So we've completed physical due diligence on several properties before we landed on the 2 sites for phase 1. And why don't we have a quick look at those now? Next slide, please. So the first site that we identified was 11 Macy, which is located in the Victoria Park and Danforth area in Scarborough. It's actually located about 200 meters southeast of 77 Victoria Park Avenue, which is one of our initial Housing Now sites. The property is owned by the City of Toronto. It's located in Ward 20, which is Councillor Crawford's ward. The parcel is approximately 28,000 square feet in area. The land use designation is neighborhoods and zoning is residential, so it works for this project for us. The schedule for the site is extremely tight, and we're looking to complete the project basically at the end of September or October, assuming all of the city approvals line up and things go smoothly. So as Brian had mentioned earlier, we're working very aggressively. All of the parties are working collaboratively, and things are moving along nicely at this point in time. We're actually looking to construct 56 suites at this property. It'll also have 8 additional modules for social services space that I discussed earlier. And the building will be just under 29,000 square feet in total GFA. Next slide, please. Second site is located at 150 Harrison. It's located 1 block north of the intersection of Dover Court and Dundas Street, and it's in Ward 9, which is the Deputy Mayor bylaws ward. Property is approximately 22,000 square feet in area, and again, it's owned by the City of Toronto, and it's actually the location of the former Division 14 police station. Land use designation is neighborhoods of this property as well, and zoning is residential, which both work for this type of use. Our estimated date for completion on this project is sort of mid to late October, which is again dependent on everything lining up with approvals as with Macy. There's no slack in our schedule, so timing is of the essence, particularly in this COVID-19 environment and emergency area that we're working in. This is a smaller site, and based on its configuration, we'll be constructing 44 units in this location, along with the applicable social services space that I've been speaking to. And the overall estimated size of this building, because it's not completely fully designed, is about 24,000 square feet. And in the aerial photograph, you'll see an area that's highlighted in green. That's actually going to be a future park of about 7,000 square feet. Next slide, please. So due to the urgency of the project, it was essential for us to sole source a design, build, manufacture in order to hit the urgent timelines in this first phase. We undertook a due diligence of modular housing manufacturers across the country, and we determined at this point in time that there was really only one design builder that was capable to meet our timelines, and that was Horizon North through its subsidiary NRB, which is located in Grimsby, Ontario. Horizon North has a proven track record, having completed 35 projects in the province of BC, which includes the 15 projects in the city of Vancouver. So we have a letter of intent that's been executed with NRB, and we're in the process of finalizing our contract documents in the immediate future. All of the units for these 2 properties will be manufactured in NRB's facility in Grimsby, Ontario. And the mayor, deputy mayor bylaw, myself, and other senior members of the team, including Abby, have toured the facilities, and we're comfortable that they have the ability to undertake and deliver on this project. Just another point of interest for it, Fairfax Financial has also taken a 49% interest in Horizon North, which provides them with an even stronger balance sheet and additional executive support. They're very strong investors, and they recognize that housing now is in its infancy stage. It should be a growth industry in the construction world going forward. Next slide, please. Well, let me just, before we finish up, maybe just let me talk about a few of the key milestone dates. So we've submitted for site plan on Macy, and we're looking to submit for site plan later this month on Harrison. We'll be hosting community engagement meetings over the next several weeks on both properties. We're looking at 3 meetings on Macy on June 16th, June 23rd, and July 8th. And we're currently looking at meetings on June 17th and June 24th for Harrison. And if a third meeting is required, then we'll go forward with that. So again, in terms of construction, we're probably looking at Q4 of this year for both projects opening. And at this point in time, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you.
All right, I'll wait for the presentation to be taken off the screen so I can see everybody. There we go. So do we have any questions of staff? Okay, we've got one. Jane, remember to take your, yeah, that's it.
Firstly, I'd like to congratulate staff and Councillor Bayo for all the work that's been done on this. It's very exciting. Question, what is the lifespan of modular housing? Is this construction that lasts for many years, decades? I just don't know much about it.
Jane, it's very typical of any version of construction, although they do the bulk of it in the shop and ship it, but it's as long as any building, as long as it's maintained properly. So there's no concern on that front.
Second question, what is the anticipated community reaction to modular housing in these 2 locations? Any sense of that?
Well, I think, we're dealing with the homeless, and so you will always have people that will support you on this initiative. And then there will be those that are concerned that maybe don't understand all of the benefits that the city is trying to help and to take forward. So, I expect to have a mixed bag of reactions on this front. We'll find out a little bit better next week because our first meeting's on June the 16th.
Thank you, and congratulations again.
Thanks, Jane.
All right, if there's no other questions, then, we've got one, Paula Fletcher there. You're on mute.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Congrats to Deputy Mayor, who has worked very hard on this, particularly during COVID, and the need to find housing for people and get them out of crowded shelters. And also to Abby and to the staff at CreateTO. Just a big shout out to all of you. It seems that both of these sites are about half an acre. And I'm wondering if Mike, if you have looked at other sites, or if we're just waiting to see how these 2 work. And it's a fairly small site, so there's not a lot you can do there. Have we got a inventory of small sites like that, half an acre sites that might be available for more of this?
Yes, Councillor Fletcher, we do have an inventory, but we're going to have to expand that as well. The overall program the city is looking at is 1,000 units. So we're talking a lot of sites. Phase 2 is going to be 150 units. So I imagine that we're going to have 3 new sites for this. We have a short list that we're looking at, but we need to continue to add sites from across the city to that list to explore. And the criteria come into play. I think we went through 4 to 6 sites in terms of actually performing physical due diligence on those sites before we landed on these 2. And that included doing geotechnical, environmental, discovering that some of the sites were just too contaminated. We couldn't utilize them. One site in particular was the subway box was running underneath it. So in some locations across the site, the subway box was only 5 feet below grade. So it becomes difficult. But the good news is the city does have a lot of sites across the city, and we'll continue to add to the list and explore it and move forward on that front.
Simply because half an acre is not a Housing Now site, right? I mean, we're not sending out half an acre for housing now.
No.
So it's very particular for this use. And I know that that you have all the properties, so looking at what the next 10 sites might be and softening everybody up for potential housing, modular housing in the neighborhoods would be excellent. And it is not a shelter, it is actually housing. So it should be way easier than citing a shelter. We'll find out.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions, then I will move that the board receive the item for information. We'll take it to a vote. All those in favor? All right, no one opposed, so that motion is carried. So that concludes our business for today. Thank you, members and staff. Now we're going to also go into a closed session. So members, we have an item that requires a closed session, and I will move a motion for the board to go into closed session and ask that the board secretary display and read the motion aloud.
Mr. Chair, we just need to add an item to the public agenda to state a brief explanation of the item, and then vote to add that as new business, and then we can display the motion to go into closed session.
So would we make this item 13.5?
This will be item 6. Item 5 was the leave of absence that you added at the start of the meeting, and this will be item 6.
This will be item 6.
We'll put it up in just a moment. So, Mr. Chair, you should have a motion and a vote to add this new item regarding a human resources review as new business to the agenda. Have a vote on that, and then we'll display your motion for closed session.
Okay, so can we all vote on that? All in favor? Okay, no one opposed, then that carries. And there we can see the motion.
I think it should be personnel matters. Oh, no, sorry, my apologies.
So should so we'll have a vote on this one as well? Or is that what we just voted on? Because I thought that was what we just voted on.
You just voted, Mr. Chair, to add it to the agenda. Now you're going to vote on the motion to go into closed session on that item.
All right, so let's have a vote on that. All in favor? Opposed? So that motion carries. All right, so I guess we're going to be going into closed session. And would ask the board secretary to temporarily close the meeting to members of the public and only provide access to the members, appropriate staff for the closed session. And the YouTube live stream will be suspended until